Well, good morning to James Roguski all the way from California, who's up early and bright and functional as always. James, thank you for coming back on.
Well, thank you very much for having me, John. I appreciate it.
Regular viewers, of course, need no introduction to Mr. Roguski from California. He's been given the honorary title by this channel of the Watchman. And if you don't know what that means, then read Ezekiel and you'll see the importance of what's going on here. And I think you've been pretty well full-time on this, James, for some years now. But why should people watch this video? Why is it important? Because I was amazed about the implications for the United States.
Well, very simply, again, thank you very much for having me. In today's world, people are on overload, and that is part of the game, I think, that is being played on humanity. And so, very simply, on July 19th, 2025, that is the deadline for most, not all, but most of the nations around the world to submit a letter from their head of state, be it a president, prime minister, or literally even the Pope, submit a letter to the WHO if they wish to reject the amendments to the international health regulations that were very sneakily adopted on June 1st, 2024. So the rules that govern the international health regulations are very clear, but everybody seems to be confused about them. The amendments were adopted on June 1st, but it took several months for the WHO to properly translate them into the 6 languages that they support. And so the official announcement was not sent to all of the nations until September 19th of 2024. 10 months from then is July 19th. Now, 4 nations have an additional 8 months. That would be the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Netherlands, New Zealand, and Slovakia, because back in 2022, amendments were adopted, and they did send letters or verbal transmissions to the WHO, so they rejected the shortening of that time frame, and so they have an additional 8 months. Now, I'm not at liberty to say, but I do have it on good authority, that at least one nation, not the United States, is likely to have already rejected the amendments. I don't have evidence to that, so I don't speak to something unless I have the document. But the whole point of it, really, John, is does anybody in your audience really know what these amendments are?
Of course.
Did they have any input into them?
Of course.
Did their government listen to their will about all of this?
Not in this country.
Yeah, and not anywhere really around the world. There's been a lot of misinformation, and I just try to stick with the facts. And so the bottom line, really, at this point in time, Keir Starmer is not going to send a letter to the WHO to reject the amendments. Okay. Now
He's not.
I did a very, very, very unscientific poll. This is the most unscientific poll you could do. I put an open letter out to all the world leaders, and I asked my readers, do you want your nation to reject these amendments? And the last time I looked, it was like 1,700 to 0. Right? Everybody who knows what's going on, it's obviously not a fair.
Well, it's strange that no one wants this centralized control and this hegemony from the World Health Organization that has the power of the nation state behind us and able to put us in prison if we go against it. I mean,
so I recognize the doomerism that's out there, the learned helplessness of there's nothing you can do. Okay. But, on a metaphysical level and on a reality level, if you don't speak up and say what it is you want, your silence is consent. And so I would be remiss in my duty, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity, just to give people warning, hey, the deadline is coming up. I hate it when somebody tells me that I just missed a deadline.
11 days, James.
From when we're recording this, that's correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
11 days. And of course, we'll put the links that people can use to.
I've tried to make it very simple. People can go to rejecttheamendments.com, and you can call me. You know this. I always give my phone number. You can call me directly at 310-619-3055. I'm in California. You can call me, text me, WhatsApp, Telegram, Signal, or whatever you want to use. I realize that everybody is completely confused about this.
Yeah.
And that's what they want. The way it's set up is all of the nations got together back in 2024. They rammed this through. There's a whole, we could talk for hours about the story of how it was, they didn't follow their own rules and they shoved it through at the last minute. And there was no public comment. They broke their own rules to make it happen. They violated their own WHO constitution with some of the things that are in here. But, the vast majority of people have no idea. And the way it's structured, if every government simply procrastinates and does not proactively invoke Article 61 and Article 59, Paragraph 1, and say, we reject them, then, hey, it's like at a wedding, right? When they say, should anyone oppose this matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. Now is the time to let your government know that you are not happy that they have not listened to you. And, I realize it's an exercise in futility, but you must speak up. Otherwise, your silence is viewed as consent.
Yeah, this is happening unless governments actively invoke this Article 61. And of course, a lot of governments, Canada, the United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, many people think that they are very much pro this abdication of sovereignty and internationalisation and globalisation.
I hold out a little bit of hope for New Zealand because just prior to the deadline of December 1st in 2023, New Zealand did reject the 2022 amendments. So they still have an extra 8 months.
Okay, that's good.
Okay, but you're absolutely right about the UK and Australia and Canada.
And Europe has already fallen. I mean, we've got great and noble people in countries that I'm in contact with, the Netherlands, Denmark. But the vast majority of the population is doing nothing, and the governments, on the whole, seem to be for this international, top-down, anti-subsidiarity agenda, which is concerning. Now, I'd assumed that the United States was walking away from all this. Well, what's the story there, James? Why is the United States going to be bound by these?
Again, almost everybody seems to be very confused about the situation. So when Donald Trump came into office, one of the very first things he did, I believe it was actually on the first day in office, is he signed an executive order. It was a very confusing executive order because it revoked the Biden administration's revocation of his attempt to exit the WHO. So back in 2020, he started a year-long process to exit the WHO. That's only a year-long process because in 1948, when Harry Truman signed the joint resolution passed by Congress, not 2/3 of the Senate, it was a joint resolution passed by Congress. In that resolution, it said, hey, we'll be nice. If we ever want to leave, we'll give you, the WHO, a 1-year notice. It said we would pay whatever money we owed, which Trump has refused to do, and we'll give you 1-year notice. So sometime in January of 2026, officially, we will have left or terminated our membership with the WHO. But that was an executive order. And executive orders just give direction to government employees, Secretary of State, Secretary of Health, and so forth. A letter was sent to the United Nations, and it was acknowledged by the Secretary General of the United Nations. Thank you, we got your letter, sorry to see you go. Okay? But he did not do the same type of letter in regards to the international health regulations. And more importantly, he did not send a letter to the WHO rejecting the amendments that the Biden administration allowed to be adopted. And so he also, on February 4th, put out another executive order and again, executive orders direct government employees to take certain actions. It's not an international thing. And he had this, it wasn't the Secretary of State, it was directed to the Department of State, and now Marco Rubio is the Secretary of State, to reevaluate all of the international entanglements, that wasn't the word they used, but all of our international agreements, to see whether they're fit for purpose and we should maintain them. Well, 180 days from February 4th gets you into August. So that review of all international agreements, I mean, that's a large task, okay, is not scheduled to be reported back to the president until after this deadline happens. Now, in my worldview, I would really like Donald Trump to also say, no, we're leaving the international health regulations as well. Now, the IHR has some good in it, has some bad in it. I could guarantee that the vast majority of the world has not read what's in the IHR. There are some abominable things in the IHR.
They've been changed so many times as well.
And so I kind of think that at the moment, with all that has been happening in the world, I admit the IHR is not as important as what's gone on in Israel and Gaza and Iran and the big beautiful bill and all these many, many things. So there's this risk of this important little letter that needs to be sent from Donald Trump to the WHO just kind of accidentally slipping through the cracks.
I think the importance is there, James. It's just that it won't hit us between the eyes this month or maybe even this year. But in the fullness of time, the implications of an international health tyranny to me are huge.
The big issue with what's going on with the IHR, and we can get into some of the details if you like, but let me wrap up my call to President Trump to do something that I think he wants to do. I think he would want to close the door on the Biden administration's support of these international health regulations. Trump was obviously not in office, and I don't know that Joe Biden was in office back in June of 2024. The U.S. government pushed for the amendments. We were the original ones who started them, and they were adopted under the Biden administration. It took time to translate. September 19th was when all of the nations were notified. Trump takes office, makes some statements, and I think they've gone like this, and they said, oh, we're done with it. There's nothing more we need to do. We're done with the WHO.
Well, that was my impression.
But have they actually addressed this completely separate agreement, the IHR? Now, it's mentioned in his executive order that, we're going to ignore all that stuff, but it didn't address it on an international level. The letter has not been sent, okay? So somebody in the State Department needs to get on the job right now. It's a very simple letter. Dear WHO, so nice to talk to you again. Appreciate these amendments that the Biden administration allowed to be adopted. No thanks. We reject them in their totality. Have a nice day.
Well, I think I could write that letter in 10 minutes, couldn't you?
I think it would take you about 5. You'd have to double check it, and you probably have
to check the spellings.
You could have Grok or ChatGPT do it in 10 seconds. Okay.
Indeed, and then Mr. President, I'm sure, would be delighted to sign it with a 2-minute explanation. And tweet about it and whatever. So I don't have Donald Trump's cell phone on speed dial. I don't even know if he uses a cell phone. I don't have access to his chief of staff or Marco Rubio or whatever. I've been trying for 3 years to get them. But someone watching this video may well have access Or someone watching this video may know Joan, who knows Harry, who knows Fred, who knows Marco Rubio.
Exactly. And also, President, I believe it's pronounced Fico in Slovakia, I may be mispronouncing it, New Zealand or Bulgaria or President Putin. There's 196 member nations that are privy to the international health regulations. There's only 194 members of the WHO. These are two very different agreements.
Yes.
And so every leader of every nation, every Caribbean island, every South American, every African, every Southeast Asian, you name it, throughout Europe, whatever, now would be a really good time for people all around the world to let their leaders know. It's not Parliament, it's not Congress, it's not, the Knesset, it's the officials who speak for your nation in international affairs, usually foreign ministry, or they call it the Secretary of State in our country. Depending upon the country, your health minister might be authorized to send that letter, but it's really meant to come from the head of state to the WHO. Very simple letter. Thank you.
They can all sign the name. Donald Trump can sign his name. Keir Starmer can sign his name. Mark Carney can probably manage to write Mark Carney. Who, this can be done. And
so, what you just said, if people can take this video, put it out on social media, get it to go, viral as possible. As you said, somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. What I'm trying to do is get everyone to realize that this deadline is coming.
Yep.
It's better to know about it and take action in advance rather than watch it pass and go, oh, darn, I wish somebody had told me.
And after the deadline, James, if a country realizes it's made a terrible mistake, how easy will it be to undo that mistake after the 19th of July 2025?
Well, interestingly, in the IHR from 2005, the United States submitted not a rejection, but they submitted reservations, meaning they just wanted to make some things clear. They accepted the IHR, but they submitted reservations. And they did so after the deadline, because we're the United States. We do whatever the heck we want to do. Okay?
True.
So on one level, any international agreement has nations, that sign on, but then they don't abide by the agreement and they leave. The United States is leaving agreements all the time. So on one level, in the long run, if you can get the political will to pull out of the WHO, to leave, Trump left the Paris Climate Accords and terminated the Iran nuclear agreement.
Yeah.
The United States is pretty darn good at ignoring whatever kind of agreement we may have gotten into. Every nation deals with that in its own unique way. The point with this is none of our elected officials or deep state, bureaucratic, civil service, representatives that are supposed to be working for us in our government have asked the people what they think about what's in this document. And if we want to dig into it a little bit, first and foremost are the definition of terms. Well, one of the things that got changed in the international health regulations under Article 1 was the definition of relevant health products. Now, it doesn't include what I would recommend as relevant health products, which are vitamins and minerals and good organic food and herbs and homeopathic remedies and any other kind of natural something. No. The only thing listed are pharmaceutical products, drugs, diagnostics, and they added gene-based therapies. Now, hold on just a moment, okay? Gene-altering therapies are not a relevant health product to protect people against an unknown pathogen. That's insane.
And yes, it's on the list. I mean, it strikes me that all of the things on this list are marketable. Medicines, vaccines, diagnostics, medical devices, vector control products, personal protective equipment, decontamination products, assistive products, antidotes, cell and gene-based therapies, and other health technologies.
Everybody should have a wearable so that, if you're... This leads into another aspect of it, which...
Maybe we could implant it under the skin on the forehead. With a tattoo above it to let people know where it is.
Exactly. And so...
Horrific.
One of the other amendments, and some of these amendments are so slippery, it's just it's a word here and it's a word there, okay? Disinsection, okay?
Disinsection,
not disinfection. Insect, getting rid of insects.
Yeah.
Okay?
Oh, I see, right. Oh, yes.
Right. So if you've ever flown to certain nations.
Yeah.
And I sent you a couple of videos, and you can put the links in the
I will.
description.
We've got the links to those. Horrendous.
They added into, I believe off the top of my head, it was Article 27, where they want
24 and 27, yeah.
They want nations to ensure that the conveyance operators, which means
the airlines,
or cruise line or whatever it might be, to perform whatever health measures might be required, very, very vague, okay, on embarking and disembarking. So, what in the world might that be interpreted as? Oh, you go to a nation, and we didn't talk about this prior, and I didn't send it to you in the details, but built into the existing regulations, there's a doublespeak in Article 31 that when you start reading it, it sounds pretty good. It says, nations should not require paperwork for vaccines or any other kind of treatment for travelers, okay? But then the second paragraph of Article 31 essentially says, unless the nation wants to. And if you're traveling and you're outside of your own nation, the foreign nation to which you're visiting can quarantine and have diagnostics or treatments or vaccines forced upon the person who's traveling. Now, when you first read Article 31, which is the existing IHR, it starts off sounding pretty good. Oh, you really shouldn't do that unless the nation wants to. Okay. Well, they added in a couple of things in Articles 27 and 24 where upon embarking and disembarking, so you're about to get onto the plane and now they want to do something to you. I mean, the pressure tactic, or you want to get off the plane and they're going to do something to you. Well, one of the things that they do commonly now under the IHR is they have the flight attendants walk up and down the aisles spraying insecticide. Okay, which, if you think about it, I mean, if you're worried about some malaria, carrying bacteria or Zika causing mosquito, the concern is it might hide in your bag or it could hide, anywhere. Just going up and down the aisles spraying something is an ineffective way to disinsect something. It's a good way of poisoning everybody on the plane.
I'm going to force all of you to inhale toxic insecticide, whether you like it or not.
Yes.
It's outrageous.
Absolutely. Now,
that's Article 24 and 27, James, isn't it?
They also added the word quarantine the conveyance. Now,
isolation and quarantine.
I didn't send you all of the definitions, but there's a difference between the word isolation and quarantine. Now, I don't know in your experience in medical profession if people are clear on that. Maybe in the medical profession they are.
No, I'm not.
In common use, people go, well, what's the difference? Well, in the IHR, isolation is something that you do to someone who is clearly ill. You isolate them. Okay? Quarantine, they have another word, which is suspect. To put it into English, if somebody on a cruise boat is ill and you're on the same cruise boat, you're a suspect. And suspects can be quarantined under the new regulations. Meaning, just because you're on the boat and somebody maybe had a problem, maybe they, failed a bullshit PCR test, everybody on the boat is now a suspect, and that boat can be quarantined.
It's the arbitrary nature of this that's concerning, isn't it? I mean,
absolutely.
To quarantine someone who has the wrong political views doesn't sound that far away. I'm not saying it's in the IHR,
if you want to get into arbitrary, I believe I sent you, so you may have in front of you, the definition of this new authority that the amendments give to the Director General to declare not just a public health emergency of international concern, PHEIC, or fake.
Yeah.
They have what I call a super fake. It's a pandemic emergency. John, do you have that in front of you? Can you read that?
What's it under?
It's under Article 1. It's the second.
Under Article 1. Yeah. Right. A pandemic emergency means a public health emergency of international concern that is caused by a communicable disease and has or is at risk of having wide geographical spread to within multiple states and is exceeding or is at high risk of exceeding the capacity of health systems in response to those states and is causing or is at high risk of causing substantial social and or economic disruption, including disruption to the international traffic and trade, and 5, requires rapid, equitable, enhanced coordination, international action with whole of government and whole of society approaches. And it goes on to relevant health products. And I don't really understand all those words I've just read out to you, James, to be quite honest.
This is the point. It is or might be. Is it at risk of causing these problems? Well, who makes this determination that we're in a pandemic emergency?
Yeah.
Are there any scientific criteria? Are there any data points? Are there a certain number of deaths? Is there a drop in GNP, that you gauge this on? It's just, hey, the Director General said so.
And who it may be that everyone watching doesn't fully trust the Director General of the WHO. Who knows, They may let us know in the comments.
And one of the things with the amendments that they could have, should have, would have done, but they have not done, is there is no manner in which the nations can revoke that declaration. There is no way to push back at this totalitarian decree. Oh, there's a public health emergency of international concern because whoever is in that office, the Director General, said so. That's totalitarian, authoritarian dictatorship. That is nowhere near representative democracy. That is nowhere near in alignment with the WHO's guidelines of the ruling body of the WHO is supposed to be the World Health Assembly, right? So in the U.S., we talk very proudly about how we have 3 branches of government: the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. Well, there is no judicial control over the WHO. They don't have a judicial branch. There is no court that can say, hey, WHO, you violated your constitution, so many ways. You have to stop, and we're going to enforce you and make you stop. There is no anything in the international health regulations whereby the nations can say, hey, we need to get together and vote and end this decree. Now, maybe they could, but it's not in the international health regulations. Now, to go forward with that, one of the things that is difficult to explain, but I'm going to do my best, okay? When this all started, back in February of 2023, after all of the amendments had been submitted, they put together a group of experts. They called it the International Health Regulations Review Committee. Mm-hmm. And in February of 23, they made recommendations on the originally proposed amendments. And they said, hey, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do the other thing, maybe you could do this, maybe you could do that. And they said very clearly, now this is the WHO's own experts reviewing the proposed amendments, giving advice to the WHO. They said, well, you really can't put financing in the regulations. There are things that regulations can have. You can talk about, naming diseases and advertising and labeling, and you can talk about, classification of disease and so forth and so on. But putting financial issues in regulations is in violation of the Constitution of the WHO, which states very clearly the 5 things that can be in regulations. And money ain't one of them. Well, they went and did it anyways, but they did it in a way that was so sneaky. The whole time that all of these negotiations were happening, up until April of 2024, for a year and a half at least, maybe even a little bit more than that, they never gave access to a revised version of the amendments. When they presented the revised version in April and in May, just before the 2024 World Health Assembly, Article 44 BIS was nowhere to be seen. It did not exist. On the day that they voted for the amendments, Article 44 BIS, which was all about financing, how all the money is going to, be directed to fund this big growth of, what they call core capacities of all the nations, snuck into the document, but they accidentally forgot to put it in bold print. So the nomenclature that they use is the existing IHR was in regular font, and whatever was in bold was a new amendment. Well, they conveniently made it look like it had always been there.
Oh, they just forgot to make it bold in the document.
They forgot to make it bold. So
anyone can make a mistake, James.
The manner in which they just rode roughshod over Article 55, which said they were supposed to give 4 months' notice. All documents are supposed to be submitted 4 months in advance for any kind of amendment. Well, they didn't actually submit the final version until a couple of hours before they voted on it, and they didn't properly identify what that amendment was. And at the last minute, they held what they call was a vote. Many people feel that it was in violation of all their rules. But the whole point of it is, does anybody want more money to go through the WHO to build out the industry that makes products that harm people? Because they're not talking about, vitamin C and vitamin D and vitamin A and minerals, these should all be given to people freely as a global public good to improve their health, especially when there's a pandemic. I got to admit, if they had included natural, healthful things, I might have been tempted to say, we should try to get that to people who are ill, certainly to treat them or prevent it. But no, it's all drugs all day long, PCR tests that are bogus, and cell and gene altering therapies to prevent a pandemic. Now, hold on a moment. I think we're in the middle of a pandemic that's caused by the treatments for the problem that they tried to solve. So there's many other things. If people go to rejecttheamendments.com, I think I have a total of 24 reasons. They amended 24 or so of the articles. Some of them were tiny little tweaks. They changed a word here or there, which is interesting. The whole point is our governments are not listening to us. And they're not being forced to listen to the WHO. They're all doing the bidding of Big Pharma. And this is the core problem that we all need to stand up and say, no, we don't want an international agreement funneling money through the WHO and through this international agreement for relevant health products that are all drugs and diagnostics from the pharmaceutical industry. And why in the world would we want to give even more authority to this totalitarian dictator general of the WHO to declare a pandemic emergency on top of a public health emergency of international concern, where there's no criteria, there's no data points, there's no evidence. It's just because he said so, and you can't undo it in any way, shape, or form. And then all of the nations use that as an excuse. Literally, in U.S. law, on the very last full day of the Obama administration, going all the way back to 2019, the CDC put forth regulations that, to summarize it all, it says the U.S. doesn't have to, but if the Director General of the WHO declares a public health emergency of international concern, that's all the evidence we need. We can declare a public health emergency in the United States just because he said so. In Malta, it's even worse. They passed a law that said if the WHO makes any recommendations, those are automatically regulations in Malta. Now, I don't know the details of how each nation interacts in their legal code with what the WHO recommends. Mostly, it's a psychological game. Oh, they recommend it and they know everything, right? They are the authority who, has all the wisdom and knowledge and science, right? So trust the WHO and do whatever they say. And so governments in the middle play this game of, well, we had to do it because the WHO said so. Even though they don't have to do it, they write it into their own emergency laws that gives them authority to do horrific things to people. And so the core of all of what's going on with the WHO is they're just acting as the marketing and financing, distribution and promotion arm for big pharma. And we haven't even talked about, and let's not talk about, the pandemic agreement, which is a totally separate thing altogether. Let's keep
just
this
the
focused.
IHRs, yeah.
The IHR happened, back in June of 2024, more than a year and a half ago. And the deadline for Donald Trump and every other leader around the world to send a letter to the WHO saying no thanks means that if they do that, then there will be two classes of nations. There will be members that are party to the amended IHR, but then there will be members that are party to the existing. Now, I think the whole thing should go away. I think it's a mess. But there are currently two classes of nations right now. Iran, Slovakia, Netherlands, and New Zealand. They don't have this same deadline because they rejected amendments a couple of years ago. And so they have 8 more months to make this decision, and I hope they will. But from my point of view in the United States, I trust that Donald Trump wants nothing to do with this.
I believe that's true.
But his administration has not yet done the proper paperwork to let the world know that we reject the amendments that the Biden administration allowed to be authorized.
I do know there will be people watching this video who are associated or members of the new administration.
Tell them that. Give me a call. Yeah. And
we are doing 100%. I mean, just think if the WHO said, you know what, we need to make sure everyone in the world is replete with iodine, vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin A, and some omega-3s, say.
I'd gladly make a contribution towards that cause.
Health could be revolutionised just with those simple things.
Yes.
Why aren't they doing that instead of all this don't even want to read the list. Medicines, vaccines, diagnostic medical devices, vector control products, personal protective equipment, decontamination products, assisted products, antidotes, cell-based gene therapy, and other health technologies. Come on,
well, let's
pick the low-lying fruit first.
One of the reasons is that during these negotiations, they had a list of over 400 relevant stakeholders, organizations. Everybody always mentions the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and Gavi and so forth and so on. But there were 400 groups that were allowed to participate. Now, the problem, as I see it, is a little bit different than I think most people view it. We have lost our sovereignty to multinational corporations who take advantage of their wealth and power to influence these intergovernmental organizations. It's supposed to be that, much like every state in the United States is a signatory to the Constitution, which is a federation of 50 states, the WHO is supposed to be run by 194 nations. The IHR is supposed to be controlled by 196 nations. One nation, one vote, regardless of population. But does anybody here listening to this know who was in their delegation to the WHO when these agreements were reached? Did those delegates ask you what you wanted them to vote? Or were they in direct contact with pharmaceutical corporations, non-government organizations, all of these relevant stakeholders who are, power brokers, who you could call them special interest lobbyists, okay? They know, and they put wording in the financing in Article 44 BIS, the one that snuck in, that money is going to go to organizations and entities that are helping governments. And so when you look at what happened with USAID and the money that was going to various places, in many ways, this is like WHO AID. They all pushed for this because they want public money to flow through the WHO to end up going to organizations that are doing the WHO's bidding, helping countries, maybe vaccinating women in Kenya for tetanus, that has some sterility ingredients in that vaccine. Maybe they're helping, fight AIDS, with drugs and all these sort of things. What is it that these organizations are doing that funding will flow to that we the people have no knowledge of and no say in? So we've lost our sovereignty to international organizations and corporations.
Abortion campaigns.
Abortion campaigns, whatever it may be. And what we've also lost, which I think everyone, I'd be shocked if somebody disagreed, our representatives, members of parliament, members of whatever legislative body, don't listen to the people. They listen to special interest lobbyists, and certainly in the United States, they listen to their donors. They listen to these supposed experts who are towing the pharmaceutical party line, saying, you need more mRNA jabs to be manufactured everywhere around the world because that's, the future. So it's the future demise of our humanity.
Unfortunately, it is happening.
Now, I'm a realist, and I understand that the vast majority of national leaders are not going to sign the letter and send it, but I am quite certain that some leaders will. And so if you're listening to this and you reach out to whomever who can convince, the president of Slovakia or Bulgaria or, any other nation who did not choose to vote for these things.
Especially who's not ideologically committed to abdication of sovereignty and internationalization and globalization.
If you get your nation, your national leader, to send a letter and reject it, then you are a hero in my eyes. Yeah. I'm trying, and so far I have failed to get the attention of Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, or Donald Trump, the president, to get them to do that for the country in which I reside, the United States. I hope they will do that. I'm trying to get people. Thank you very much, John, for using your platform to get this out there. Tell somebody who tells somebody who tells somebody. Put this video all over social media. Any world leader who steps up to the plate and writes a simple letter, signs it, and sends it before July 19th has to be seen as a courageous individual.
I'm pretty sure I can get a message to RFK.
I don't know that RFK has authority to actually sign a letter, but he
can make a noise.
Make a noise, let it be known, and so here's the whole point. If you're unaware, okay, let me assume that maybe the vast majority of people in the Donald Trump administration thought they covered all the bases and that they were done with this, and they're just blissfully unaware. They got a lot of stuff on their plate. If we don't raise their awareness, or don't try anyways, then bad on us, right? If I know something and I keep it a secret, well, that's bad on me, right? But if I know something and I do everything I possibly can to influence the person who has the authority to sign and send that letter on behalf of our nation, if I know that they know and then they don't do it, then bad on them.
That is exactly the principle of the watchman in Ezekiel chapter 33. It's exactly that principle. Now, you've got a Substack, James, which I'm not going to go through, but you've got 10 excellent reasons top 10 reasons to reject the amendments to the international health regulations before the 19th of July 2025 deadline. I know you've got 14 more in other documentation, so we're not going to go through them all. I think you've covered quite a few of the main points there. And you've got the letter to President Trump. So we will put the link to your Substack, which is excellent. And we'll put the link to you directly, which is very generous of you to do that, I must say. We've got the links and your email and telephone number there. And do watch these horrendous aircraft videos of people being forced to inhale these vile insecticides. James, as always, I really appreciate what you're doing. A lot of work.
Well, John, thank you for the opportunity, and thank you to everyone in your audience for if you've gotten to this point. I welcome the opportunity to speak to anybody who is interested in taking action on this. Again, my phone number is 310-619-3055, and all the information is on rejecttheamendments.com.
We've got the link. We've got the link to that.
Don't do a Google search for that. Google is not your friend. Just go directly to https://rejecttheamendments.com.
The link will be at the top of the description, so people can click that. And I was going to say something else, and I can't remember what it was now. It'll come to me as soon as I click stop. But no, that's great.
We all have.
Thank you so much.
We all have an obligation, not just to not comply with wrongful demands, but to voice our opinion in whatever way we can. If you remain silent, it's taken as consent. So please, speak up. Let your government leaders know what you want, understanding that they're most likely not going to listen, but they can't listen if they can't hear you. If you don't speak, then you have no recourse. They say, well, you didn't say anything. Don't be the one who doesn't speak up. Be the person who shouts from the rooftops saying, hey, we don't want this. We want you to make it be rejected. And if they then fail to do so, we move forward into the future with that knowledge.
Yeah. Well, YouTube analytics tell me about 30% of people watch to the end of these sort of interviews, James. So to that 30% that's still with us, thank you. God bless, and thank you very much, James.
Thanks again.